afternoon and welcome to this week's disruptED. You might have noticed that our background has changed somewhat.
New setup.
New setup. Poor old Steve is poorly after his trip to the States last week, so he is recuperating. And instead we have Robett. And Robett is...
Backup / average backup.
Yeah, he's the average special guest. And Robett is the person that helped to establish the whole platform of Switch Aotearoa, and someone who I have enjoyed chatting to in the past about all things education and entrepreneurship and,
we have good banter.
Stuff. Yes. Yep. Absolutely. So,
welcome to my office.
Yeah. This is, you can tell it's Robett's office because
I literally sit here to do what I do.
Awesome.
Yep.
So, the plan was with Steve, we were going to talk about some play-based approaches to learning, and that's something that I know I'm pretty sure Steve will be looking at next week. So we thought it was a good opportunity to pick up our conversation that we've had in the past about education. And I know that you've got some very real views based on your personal experience around schooling. I think it's important that people hear those, because what I hear from you is what I still see in many of my young people.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. So do you want to sort of talk about your experience of
education?
School?
Yeah. So in a nutshell, like I failed high school, I couldn't get into university, never was book smart, street smart, and then now I'm in a spot where I have this funky thing where I see friends that have then gone to uni, and many say, oh, I wish I didn't, and blah, blah, blah. And then I see many situations when I was like, man, if I was more book smart, I would have got here so much more faster.
Yeah.
So I have a bit of a weird tension between IQ versus EQ. So that's the first bit. And then secondly, I feel that when I was a young buck on the come up, so I was like the 9-year-old kid that was printing out like coloured Friends posters on A4, selling them for $2. I was the kid jumping in the golf course pond at nighttime, stealing golf balls to sell it back.
Yeah.
I was the guy.
You've had the entrepreneurial spirit
I was
from
that
day
guy.
one.
But it wasn't cool.
No.
It was, I remember they kind of thought I was, I guess, like a loser because I wasn't smart, and smart was what made you cool. And entrepreneurship wasn't even a word then. It was just like bum mentality of like, not because you weren't smart, you're doing these other things. I hustled, right?
Yeah.
And now it's flipped.
Yeah.
It's cool now. Like everyone wants to be the Zuckerberg with a flipping grey hoodie and a sweatshirt and $1 billion unicorn, and it's almost not even acceptable as like I wear this into boardrooms. This is me, right? So I feel this real tension, I guess, because I'm kind of, it feels that that world is so much more open now, or more, the door seems more open to a young person with ideas to try and do something that's not just in the cookie cutter square box. That's not to say that you don't need those things, but I think that the optics of what it looks like, I feel, has changed. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. And you're absolutely right that it is changing. And, we're seeing that in the spread of the entrepreneurial programs that are happening within schools.
Just so good.
Yeah, it is fantastic. I do feel for the young people, and to a degree to the families that are in the schooling system at the moment, because it's at a point of sort of the tipping point. I think we're literally within the tipping point of education at the moment. So for many kids, it means they're in schools, and for families, they're in schools where this is not happening still. And there's really traditional measures of success. There's really traditional structures, and in secondary schools it looks like really traditional subjects delivered pretty much the same way we experienced it 15, 20, 30 years ago.
What do you name it? Is it kind of old school versus new school?
Yeah, old school versus new school. And what is happening now is we're starting to see an increasing number of schools that are doing more around the entrepreneurial stuff, that's doing more around challenging the concepts of graduate profiles and the idea
what does that mean, graduate profile?
That idea is going beyond NCEA for a measure of success when you leave school. So in America, they've got something called mastery.org, which enables schools to ignore the nationwide school testing and to put together sort of portfolios of learning that they can then take to universities or to employers beyond school that don't fit the traditional test measures and measure just that book smart stuff.
Yeah, so we had, I think when I transitioned out, we went from School C to NCEA.
Yeah.
And so that I was the last year before I think it flipped.
Yeah.
And so then, but then all I was then told it was like kind of like merit excellence or averageness or something.
Yeah.
But it felt like for many that was doing it, they felt like it was kind of 8th place trophies. Like in my world, my dad was like, 50% is pass, 49% you fail.
Well, I think we're in the same space now. So NCA, in a sense, had an opportunity to transform education and make it more relevant and
Did it
make
work?
it more, to a degree.
For some.
And for the schools that were open to doing things differently. NCA enabled people to start moving beyond traditional just subjects because there was a whole menu of achievement standards that you could pluck from, and you could create these really interesting programs and not just deliver English, maths, science. You know, in 5th form, 6th form and 7th form. You could start doing
that was mandatory for me.
Yeah. And that is, but the thing is
it still?
That is still mandatory for many kids in our schools now.
Now, is that good or bad?
Both. You need to have a base level, in my mind, there is a base level of knowing and knowledge that is really powerful because actually that is the stuff, the foundations on which a lot of the concepts and ideas are built around. So actually knowing some basic stuff around science, being literate and being able to write and communicate is important, being numerate and particularly, understanding numbers and things around financial literacy is really important. But they weren't necessarily delivered in a useful way. So they were, a set of knowledge that was delivered to you. If you were lucky,
definitely that.
Someone might have explained the relevance to you, but for the most part not. And you were told, this is the textbook and we're working through it from beginning to end. And, and that was the experience once upon a time. That said, there were always some incredible educators that made learning relevant for young people. There always has been and always will be. NCA, it provided the opportunity to shake things up, but it didn't really happen. It happened a bit.
Yeah.
And now we're going through this NCA review at the moment, which again has potential to reframe things. I'm worried it might actually take us backwards.
What would it change? So mine was 50% you're rad, 49% you're shit. Then it was kind of like it was like A, B's or C's, but it was kind of quite a rangey. So what would the new one be?
Well, so the new one will still be achieved merit and excellence. So
kind of like the ABC kind of thing?
Yep, that sort of idea. One of the real tricky things is that with NCEA, we went away from going, this is the science curriculum, you've just got to work your way through it to do your School C exam at the end of the year, to having NCEA where you could pick and choose from a menu of, say, 9 standards, and a teacher could design a really cool one.
That's pretty cool.
With 4 or 5 standards and personalise it.
Kind of like a little menu type of thing.
Yeah, and it had real potential. But then the traditionalists got worried
Old
that
school.
the important stuff wasn't being taught.
See, that's the interesting thing. Who's to decide what's important?
That's a massive debate to be had and always to be had.
Great question.
Because the trouble is, you're always going to have your different camps. And I get frustrated with people being really binary around this about it being a skills or knowledge debate.
What does that mean?
So that means that what would be perceived as the more traditionalists are the ones who are saying that we need to have a really clear set of knowledge and knowing and things that we should all learn about the same.
No, that shit's whack.
Yeah. And then on the knowledge people try and throw stones at the other side by saying all they care about is skills and they don't care about any knowledge. And what do skills mean if you don't know things?
Well, there's builders and accountants for a reason, right?
Exactly. But my argument is that it's not binary, that we need both of those things.
I would mess with that.
But a base level of knowledge is good, but a whole lot of skills is really important.
Yeah, so back to maths, English, science.
Yep.
In 2020, if I'm 15.
Yep.
Macro overview New Zealand. What do you think's? How would you rank those 1, 2, 3?
How do you mean in terms of how well we do in those?
Oh
areas?
no, like of what would be the most critical to learn. Like so that made it. So mine was mandatory. You had to do maths, English, science. In my brain, I was like, I don't feel I need science, but I want to do. I know I probably need English so I can type some stuff, which I'm still horrendous at. But I know I need maths because if I want to do business stuff, then I can do it. So for me, I guess I only kind of thought I needed 2.
Yeah.
is that the same thinking exists, or
Oh,
maybe because
I tend to
don't know.
reframe it as I think I might be biased
No,
because
no.
I'm an ex-English teacher in English HRD, but I think communication, not English, communication is key.
Yep.
So understanding how to be
modern
literate
comms
in whatever time that you're living in.
See,
so for
I
us,
mess with
it's,
that.
multimedia. You need to know how to be critical of information you're receiving. You need to know how to produce and convey information in a really effective way, and that will be multimodal. So we're not just talking writing, we're talking about people understanding all the different ways you can communicate and your thinking and your ideas, and that's got to be fluid based on the period in which you live in.
English number one.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Macro, I agree.
Yeah.
Just because if you can't communicate, you don't exist.
Yeah, and I think a base level of numeracy is powerful.
Yes.
Because one of the biggest holes we see our people get into is when they're not financially literate.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about being functionally numerate, that is the key for me.
Functional, like
So,
you know what things mean, numbers wise.
Yeah. And so you can use a base level of numeracy in terms of, what you do in level 2, level 3, calculus and statistics may or may not be relevant depending on what you want to do beyond high school. But being functionally numerate's important.
Yeah, so I understood percentages and stuff because I knew that translated back. But I remember when we got to, what do you call the ones that's like got the numbers all in it?
The decimals?
No, but
No?
you'd use alphabet instead of in formulas.
Is that algebra?
Algebra. Is that what it is?
I think so.
I hate
You're
that
asking
thing.
the wrong person.
No, because I just didn't think that translated to real. Because when in the real, if I know my rent's 100 and my thing is this expenses, I never understood the algebra. I didn't know how that I actually understood a lot of the other stuff, like English. I want to be like literate, and I want to be able to like craft sentences, and we did like all sorts of different things, but I never messed with that algebra shit. I never got that.
Yeah, and I would argue that there's like last week we had 21C Skills Lab in as guests on DisruptED, and a lot of the work they're doing is around this very conversation in terms of going, what is relevant to know, how should we measure success, and you're the perfect example of why our traditional measures of success are not a good marker for being successful, in the sense that getting an excellence in NCA as it stands at the moment is not necessarily a marker of future success, because there are so many other skills and ways of being that's important to understand. And what I worry about, and what we work really hard to move beyond at our school, at Albany Senior, is helping young people to understand that, to say there's a both and. So I always talk about academic and personal excellence. Like, the academic stuff's handy in as much as it can be a ticket to where you want to go beyond high school, but it's not a measure of who you are. It is not a measure of what you're capable of.
You're smart, but a shit person.
Yeah, potentially, absolutely, potentially. You could be an absolute monster, but acing those NCA exams. And so what we need to think about is all of those other transferable skills that we know actually served you. You had them to a degree innately. And then you potentially had experiences and met people that meant that you ultimately saw the value. You had some early successes with your entrepreneurial spirit, and that enabled you to gain some confidence to move forward. If those young people aren't lucky enough to have those experiences and gain successes, all they do is think they're shit.
Yeah, see,
because that's the grades that they're getting.
Yep, I feel very strongly about this because we were talking about quickly before. My frustration is when the education system was like it was today, 15 years ago, when I'm 34 now, when I was 14, 15 coming up, I know the door would have been a bit wider open to be like, oh, whoa, there's this thing that I could learn about. Oh, and I would have seen, I call them breadcrumbs. I would have seen breadcrumbs of positivity. Opportunity. And it's like, oh, like I could see. And it wasn't, but obviously I've like navigated through. But I think about the thousands of kids in 1998 who were 12, 13 years old, who didn't have that thing. Where are they now to where they could be to their potential if a system was in place that would have opened some more breadcrumbs just to see. Now, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I know that if I took LeBron James and I put him in the All Blacks, he'd be shit. Yeah. Like he could maybe play the wing, I don't know, whatever. But he's excelling in what he's good at. And I feel that if he would have just brought up playing rugby, and he was always shit, he never would have known that he could have been great at this other thing. And I have this thing about, I was asked about the other day, like, what's your dream? And I was saying, I think my dream is that people don't have future regret.
Yeah.
You know, and I think there are a lot of kids.
It's like Mission Impossible, but
they've
for...
future regret. No, but future regret, because I know that.
Well, this is like Minority Report.
But they said but genuinely, when a 40-year-old looks back and sees where they're actually at, and then realizes what they potentially could have been, but they never knew the door was even there.
Yeah.
They're blind to it, and that gets me bummed, because I'm like, man, how many young bucks were like me that maybe didn't have the headspace to just be, whether it was just stubbornness or arrogance or drive or whatever it was. And so I'm saying is, you know, when you enter the real world and you become 30 and whatever, and maybe you're an amazing accountant or you're an amazing builder or you're an amazing architect, I think, and I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I feel that if you can give positivity at the youngest age possible and have a system that makes them feel successful in something, not just like your shit. Like my career advisor, 15 years old, you can work at a warehouse packing boxes. Yeah. And that was my box. Yeah. Cool. And I've even said, like, I've got no beef with those who need to work in a warehouse to pack boxes. My beef is that wasn't a true reflection of my skill set. No. But if I didn't have the headspace, I would have been stuffed. So, and that bums me out.
Yeah, and that's a massive reason why schools need to change. Yeah. And, you know, I'm proud to be at a school that was built on the foundations of it's not if you're bright, it's how you're bright. And it has worked really hard.
That's cool.
To live out the belief that every young person comes to us with unique gifts. And that we're there our job is there to seek out their unique gifts and shine a light on them.
So you have a thing,
it's not if you're bright, it's how you're bright. So foundation principal Barbara Kavanagh, it was a saying she came across and really resonated with her.
I messed with that.
Yeah, and it became a real sort of part of our DNA and how we operate at our school.
I genuinely think that's right. It's not if, not how. Yeah. Not if, but how.
Yeah, and it's a really important thing that's, you know, part of the reason why it was a school that I was itching to be a leader of, and I'm feeling really privileged. I was at Hobsonville Point, another modern learning environment whose ethos and way of being was, in a sense, built on the shoulders of Barbara's work at Albany Senior High School. We learnt from what they did, and particularly around the impact projects. And my concern is that, you know, these voices that are talking about the fact that we've got to go back to basics, we've got to go back to knowledge, we've got to make sure that we're doing well at international PISA tests and maths and science and all the rest of it. What's that? So PISA, it's done a hell of a lot of damage in my mind. It's an international test that ranks countries against countries in their rates of learning around sort of maths, science, all of those things.
That sounds good. Or is it not good?
It's not good.
Because
what it does is it ranks everyone, and New Zealand has slipped down the ranks in our maths and our thing. So that becomes fodder for traditionalists to say, oh, well, you know why that is, because people are starting to do new fandangled things. We need to go back to basics.
So it's ammo against the old school.
But what they've found is, I think it's Korea, I might be lying, is they've actually abandoned the PISA test because they've been acing it up the top and realised that they are the unhappiest students in the world. And they've decided to abandon it because actually they decided that happiness was more important and that they need to disregard. Because actually, people ace tests because they focus on testing. Yes. So those countries...
It's like faking that job interview.
Oh, you know, if those countries that focus on what PISA measures and the really sort of binary way it tests things are, of course, going to get better outcomes.
Robotic shit.
That becomes the measure of success of a country. It's ludicrous.
It's not art, it's science.
Yeah. And what frustrates me is the people that are really loud about this and our need to go back to basics and go back to that traditional stuff.
Old school with power?
Old school with power, but white privilege talking.
Oh, go on.
Yeah.
Let's go there.
No, so my concern is that
can I just say I love this banter. It's so straight talk shit. It's so good.
But we need to call out white privilege. So the idea that you can cast aspersions on how we need to do education when all you have experienced is one of white privilege in terms of your success.
Yeah.
And their view might be that people like my brothers who, they didn't do well at school, but they sort of buckled up and they did well and they now have their own businesses and they're hugely successful in the trades.
Yeah.
my brothers also had the benefit of white privilege. They were white middle-class guys that lived on the North Shore. They were surfers and they were bums.
Family together.
But they, had
yep.
really strong foundations. They had connections. They had way into apprenticeships.
Safe households.
They have safe households. They had food in their bellies.
Reliable income.
All of that stuff. Yep. And they did fine in spite of a traditional education system. That education system is not the reason my brothers succeeded. My brothers succeeded because they came from a really, in part, a solid family who have done well. Now, we know that as schools, we can't necessarily change the home situation of our young people.
Yeah.
What we can change is the experience they have when they walk through the door. So I'm not willing to rest on my laurels and deliver an education model that is not serving absolutely every young person who comes through the door.
Yeah, I mess with that.
Because I'm not in a position to change their home life.
Yeah.
And I get fed up when I see schools and educators increasingly being expected to fix all of the social woes in the world. Because we can't. We can't teach.
You can control your box, though.
Yeah, we can control our box. So we need to be very careful about what's inside that box. And it needs to make sure that it is the place that shines a light on those skills if they don't happen to be in a home or a situation that's willing to do that. We need to be the people that provide the connections and the networks. And actually, I will use my white privilege for their good.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in being a Pākehā saviour coming in on my white horse. But I am interested in thinking, how can every school tap into any privilege to make sure that every young person that walks through that gate
feels that
is getting all of the benefits that we can collectively provide.
Because in many environments, in my high school days and my world I was in, if they weren't getting positivity at home at all, and if they weren't getting it at school, it's basically zero positivity for anything anywhere, and they get attracted to the only thing that then grasps so they feel like they have something. And I think it's super powerful that when you can say that and generally do it, you're doing it in a way that's realizing that where they're from outside of your box, which you can't control, they're at zero. So when they come in, find the one, find the plus, find it, because it's always one or two little snippets like these breadcrumbs. You never realize what a single sentence at the right time to the right person in the right place can actually do for someone's entire existence.
Totally.
And the awareness that you realize that if you can control it within your box to find those things, that can mean the most for so many people.
I've had personally the experience, but I've seen it in incredible educators that I've worked in, that a passing conversation you've had with a young person when they're feeling low, and years ago,
you forget.
They've come back and they've repeated, you said such and such and such and such, and that changed the trajectory.
Isn't that cool?
And it actually makes me want to have a little cry at the moment.
Totally.
Because, one of the reasons why I can't believe we're not having our doors knocked down in education for people to come teach us, it is one of the most incredibly privileged jobs you can have in terms of having the opportunity, to do this for our young people. And so the reason I fight so bloody hard doing all of the stuff I do in education is because I want every single school in our country to be inclusive. And I want every single school in our country to believe it's not if you're bright, it's how you're bright.
I love that.
And I want every single school in our country to be making sure that they're not just learning the basics, they're learning the skills that matter in the 21st century. I want every kid to go through the door, and I want them to have access to the very best technology, because they may not have that at home. And I want school to be, the thing that closes the gap. School is it's about social justice. It's the place where you can absolutely close the divide. And both economically, in terms digitally, you can close that divide. But we've also got to close the divide in terms of the skills and the experience of privilege that they're experiencing. And this is not just about race and white privilege. It's about school is about giving every single kid the same privilege, or at least it should be. And if they're going to a school that is ranking them and telling them that they're in class A through to class
Yeah,
Z,
I had that.
and that they get into the school on
Yeah.
a rugby scholarship, that is simply not okay. That is not telling them that they're of equal value. It's telling them that there's a clear structure in society which doesn't belong in the 21st century, doesn't belong in New Zealand.
I honestly feel like that was a speech for Prime Minister of Education or some shit. Hell yes.
Yeah.
Shit yeah. But it's so rad because it's real and it's
Yeah.
your truth, right? Like you feel that. Like it's so in the flipping blood.
Yeah.
Because and what's crazy too is, like last year we did a tour. We went from Kaitai all the way down to the Bluff. Went
Yes.
all these schools, right? And we had these moments throughout it, which was just a moment that changed my life.
Yeah.
But then for their world, you have those moments all day, every day with
Yeah.
all these different kids. So the actual impact of, teachers, and obviously my wife's a nurse, so I've always got this thing about teachers and nurses.
Yeah.
Like when there was this drama bullshit about the pay and stuff, I'm like, stuff that. They're worth more than CEOs.
Yeah.
Because they influence in the future of everything. Stuff that, I'm
Yeah, the more CEOs I meet, I agree.
yeah, it's like, hell yeah. That's so rad.
Yeah.
No, but because it's pure and it's purposeful and it's real because you can see the tangible things.
And I think, can we have a moment to talk about another thing that really bugs me?
Oh, you do you,
So
man.
we're one of the few secondary schools in New Zealand where you're allowed to wear whatever you want to wear to school.
Mufti.
Yeah.
Really?
We're in mufti.
It was only 7th form we could roll the mufti.
Yeah. So very few schools don't have a uniform,
So-
and they argue that uniforms are things that equalise people and make them, feel okay with who they are and all the rest of it. And the haves and have-nots are hidden. by
Knowing
a
your
uniform.
fashion wardrobe, I feel you might have a different a different take on this. So I'm happy to go there.
But my thing that really upsets me lately is the increasing number of stories we're hearing where people are getting sent home that are being pushed back for things like we had our young Pacifica dude who they're making him cut off his hair before
Stuff
before the age appropriate ceremony where he's supposed to be cutting off his hair because that school has a rule about their hair being off
Of
their
certain
neck.
height.
Yeah, no, he
Like
has
length.
to have short hair. Yeah, so he has to cut off his hair. I think he's about 8 years old, and he's having to cut it off because of school rules.
Like got
around
dreads or
hair.
something. So
Yeah.
some young buck.
And and we've had plenty of examples with people with tamoko, with that sort of thing, being told off about what they can have in school or not.
See, I could go there for a second, but no. So you don't think that's cool?
No.
Yeah.
And there's a school down at the moment which they've got some spurious reasons for doing it, talking about the fact that if a girl, it's a co-ed school,
Yep.
wants to wear shorts to school instead of a skirt, they have to see the guidance counsellor first.
What?
My question that I ask myself constantly, what the heck has uniform got to do with learning? I think we have a really precious period in our life as teenagers where we should be flying our freak flag and we should be encouraged to fly our... I can't say that twice.
Fly the freak
Fly-
flag.
fly-
Fly the
Yeah, it's hard to
freak
say
flag.
it.
Yep,
and we
go
say
on.
it.
I'm with you.
But,
I'm there in spirit.
And
Do you, man? Shit.
One of my real mantras is that school is not a place where you need to fit in. It's a place where you belong. And part of bringing the whole person to school is being able to express
Bring the
yourself.
whole person to school.
Hey, if you've got piercings, tattoos, pink hair, I couldn't give a damn. Be respectful
And
be
you.
respectful of our spaces and bring your very best version of yourself.
Don't bring the cookie cutter.
But you don't have to fit a mould. And so why, in this day and age, are we still insisting that about 99% of our secondary students wear bloody blazers and boater hats half the time? Why?
Because they're
Robett?
saying bring your whole self, but actually bring your whole self, but in this box.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not about not having standards.
It's
because
a
it is-
headspace.
Yeah. And I expect our young people to come to school and work really hard, take advantage of every opportunity that's given to them, to respect each other, to respect themselves, and to respect their environment.
But to that exact thing in the corporate world, the expectations of dress is at a standard. So
We're at a tipping point there, though, aren't we? That's changing, or is it not?
I mean, I clearly.
Are you still?
I'm
the
not.
only
I'm not.
one
I
that
know
would
what.
say
I'm
it?
just not in that world. But I know that every single person, usually in the corporate world, is the same. It's a suit and boot bullshit, right?
Yeah.
Like, cool. But would that be beneficial? So, say if all high schools go wear whatever you want, bring your full stuff to school, right?
Yeah.
And then the next wave's going to be now go into the corporate world And it's no. Now you have to wear. The expectation is this. Would you potentially be open Pandora's box for a nation's corporate ecosystem?
I don't know.
You know what I mean, though.
You know, many corporate places where you have to wear some really bad polyester, ill-fitting pants and poorly cut shirt. You know, I don't know. I think that's a really poor argument for making kids feel like they all have to look like one another in a school space.
I like the.
I feel
bring
like
your whole self.
I feel like you've got a little bit of you that likes uniform. There's a little bit of you like.
No. I'm actually, to be fair, I just wear the same thing, but it's fine. But no, I do agree. I'm just thinking if I was, because at my high school, like there was some crazy creatives, and they just rolled in green hair. They just did them. But I know if everyone did that, and then they went out, I think there'd be this barrage of youth just hit a wall against corporate. It'd be like, why can't I?
Oh, I was too busy being excited about the barrage of youth.
Yeah,
and what they actually might change.
No, but I think that's actually that would be because I see waves, right?
Yeah.
So the first wave, you do this because you know that's better for them now. But then the next wave will be well, what happened when that wave hits the real world? But I would rather deal with the consequences of truth to them than the kind of the does that make sense?
Yeah, but there's still lessons to be learned around appropriateness. So I just gave a speech the other day, and did a little Facebook Live talking about our student expectations. And and I did talk about the togs undies rule.
What's
and,
togs?
You know the old advert where it's like,
you're
on the beach, togs, you go across lines undies.
Ice cream is.
Yeah,
that's a flipping great ad.
Yeah. But that's my example I use.
How do you go togs undies too?
Well, because I've got a rule.
The naming.
That there's no boobs, bellies, or bums at school. It's just like, so there is a line of appropriateness, you know.
Boobs, belly, bums, done.
Yeah. That's like, with your male or female, don't you want to see your boobs, belly, or bum. And because actually there is a sense of appropriateness for time and place.
I agree.
And they will go off into a workplace where they have to assess the appropriateness for the time and place.
Yep.
Our head students, who are awesome, turn up to every event in suit and tie and formal dress because they like playing the role of the head student. They're there to welcome people, and
Flex
I
out.
applaud it.
Yeah,
you know, because they're thinking like, they
Few
might
pocket
be
squares.
one step up from pajamas at school, but they are turning it on because they're representing
pride.
And so there's code switching that they can learn about. I don't know if uniforms teach you about code switching. I think being able to be you and read the room and read the environment you're in. To be fair, I probably get that wrrong.
No, I would agree. Like I roll street flat and I'll do this for board meetings and everything.
Yeah.
But when it's a event with passion and care that has respect for others, I ball out.
Absolutely.
Custom suit, all black, blah, blah, whatever.
And if it's cultural, absolutely.
100%.
I'm going to respect absolutely every expectation.
And I think that's not so much about you being like, this is me, stuff you, whatever.
Yeah.
It's actually, I know, this is me, but I'm respectful to you. It's a difference.
Yeah.
So if you were wave a magic wand over all of New Zealand education, you would say, mufti for all, for...
Yeah, I mean,
from
I wouldn't. To quote my old boss Maury, I wouldn't die in a ditch over that.
Yep.
Because if for some people are really wedded to it, so be it. But I
see what you mean, though.
I don't value uniforms as a marker of a successful school.
So what is the normal rule? Uniform the whole way through?
Yes.
Okay.
Still year 13 for a lot of schools.
Yeah.
Is
so
no
why do they
uniform.
do that?
People would argue a number of reasons. They like the sense that it gives them a sense of belonging, that they're identifiable.
They're a senior.
Yeah, but also uniforms in schools are important because they see it as being an equaliser in terms of status. My experience of working in a school which has no uniform and has young people from across the sort of economic spectrum is actually give it a couple of weeks and you just totally dribbled all the way down the front.
It's not the first time.
But give it a couple of weeks. They're all a mixture of one step up from, their tracky pants and all the rest of it. And quite frankly, no one's actually looking at that stuff. They look at it less in a mufti environment than in a uniform school. And you have those kids that are absolutely paralysed going to a mufti day where everyone's wearing their best.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because actually... it's less about that in a mufti environment.
Well, if anything, then it's like, what are you going to wear to mufti day?
Yeah. I like to role model my 50-cent pants I picked up at the hospice shop.
Oh, okay.
And quite often I explain with pride how little I spent on my outfit.
Well, my school rolled mufti day is a bit different. I had two of my mates go around and they took the plastic bin and they would go into the other things, and they weren't actually the collectors for the
And
gold
just kick
coin,
it
and just flip and snake the cash. And we had.
I bet they're doing well now.
No, well, they came through. No, one of them went to prison, but they came through. They took the cash, and literally 10 minutes later, the actual people came through, and everyone's like, "We've given our gold donation." And then this like mad race came through the thing. Muftis, far. No, I get it. Cool. I love how you're so passionate about it. Because it's your thing.
Yeah, it is absolutely. And it's my thing because I've seen the difference it can make for our young people. And I can see the difference it makes when it doesn't happen for our young people. Like I've got a bit of a struggle at the moment that we, as a senior school, because they can choose to come to us at year 11, we have a number of young people who come to us because their needs haven't been met in their current school that they've been in. And that current school has said, hey, you might be a better fit for Albany.
Ooh.
You know, and
Christchurch had that with
that's,
Hagley.
you know,
Christchurch had Hagley.
Yes, yeah. And I'm really concerned that that's happening for young people. I don't ever want young people to think they're not a fit for the school they're in. I'm actually a fan. I don't want to be the magnet for kids across Auckland. I want to be the magnet for the kids in our community, and I want every other school to be the magnet for the kids in their community.
Yeah.
You know, it's not about competition. It's actually just saying, I want all of our schools to be right for all of our kids. And that goes for the kids with diverse learning needs. I'm sick of people, this is not true actually. I was going to say I'm sick of people coming to us because we're so inclusive in terms of kids with dyslexia and those sorts of things.
Needs, yeah.
You know, actually I'm super proud of that, and I will totally wear that on my sleeve. And I love that our teachers work so hard to make sure that young people with diverse learning needs get their needs met. But it upsets me that those kids are actually isolated and feel like other in their school and are told that we might be a better fit.
Yeah, because that brings
what does that tell them?
Well, it brings the whole branding thing of like, you're not one of us, you're one of them.
Yeah. And
that's dangerous for a kid.
Oh, but it's like I had a discussion with a gentleman that was working at a what would be regarded as a top all-boys school, talking about, he was sort of laughing about a student who was really flamboyant and really camp. And his brother was, really sexual. And he said, but it was good because he realised that, we weren't really a fit for him. So he went to another school. And I said, are you actually okay with that? At what point?
Oh, because he didn't even register.
No, he just said, it's good he found a school that fits him. He didn't even compute that might be okay for that young person not to feel an absolute sense of belonging at his school.
So it's like go where we think you'll fit in.
Yeah.
Not that it was our job to make you fit in.
Yeah, so I don't think we need schools that are 10 million different models and you have to go to the one that you fit into. I just think schools should be flexible enough and the walls should be permeable enough where actually every kid fits in every school.
Yeah, and if it's malleable, I don't know if that's the right word, if it's, again, my England going on, if it's malleable enough and then they can also find how they are good, then it's inclusive to bring them in. They find the good stuff, they give them the positive breadcrumbs, then they see a better future than what would be their box out.
And everybody wins.
So why wouldn't life be so simple?
I know. The reason is, do you know why?
Go. I was just going to ask, why is the life...
It's really hard to be inclusive. It's really challenging. And we're in a climate where teachers are talking about workload and underpay and all the rest of it. And actually, if you cookie cutter kids and stream them and put groups of kids together based on their ability, it's much easier to teach that group of kids. And if they're compliant and sitting behind rows of desks, easier again. Actually having these kids that are nearly free range and have a whole range of interests and needs, actually it's really complex work. And I think what we need to get better at doing is recognise the complexity of being a teacher in the 21st century and upskill and support and pay our educators accordingly.
Because if you've got old school educators in a new school world and their job's going to be harder for the same pay, they're looking out for number one, so they're copy-pasting what was done, not where the world is actually going.
And I get it. It's a human instinct, and it's a way for them to actually survive. And on one level, and an empathetic level, I understand why you wouldn't want to try and go there.
But the problem with that is you're being empathetic to the one when they're influencing 100.
Yeah. And I understand as well why, as a system, we keep resorting back to simple measures of success that are really clearly measurable. How well you know your maths and science is quite easy to measure. how successfully you can be an entrepreneur, how well you can engage in design thinking, problem solving, collaboration, creativity. Hell of a lot harder to measure and report against. So why wouldn't you default back to the stuff that's easier to measure?
Which brings you to the fact that it's not necessarily about the student and the ecosystem. It then becomes about the teacher and their willingness to open up outside their boundaries of how it was done to actually do the right job which they're paid to do.
And also we've got to get over this idea that the only measure of success is a measure that can be ranked.
What do you mean by that?
For example, we always default back to this idea that we need to be able to put a number on your success in a subject.
Okay.
So that we can rank everyone in a class, we can rank all the classes against each other in a school, we can rank, look at the Metro Mag that loves to rank all of the top schools in Auckland. Numbers.
Okay.
Whereas if we move to a system where kids could just present portfolios of their strengths that might be, visual, oral presentations of what they know, how do you rank that against one another? You can't. And so suddenly that's perceived as not valuable.
No, but in sport, that is the most valuable because they call it the intangibles.
So there we go. We need the intangibles.
No, and there's a price that goes on. No, I think, I don't know if it's the right, everything for me always goes back to sport, but in sport, it's like, look at the stats, blah, 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 blah. But then as soon as you've got context to the individual with the intangibles of the leadership, the character, the energy, the vibe, the whatever, all these other things, that's the actual value. That's the true value. So there's like there's always a disconnect between, I guess, on paper value.
Is there an intangible metric, or do they not bother trying to?
No, because that comes to gut.
Yeah.
It's the feel, it's the energy, it's the EQ, it's the soft skill.
Well, that's exactly the dichotomy in education at the moment, I believe.
I've never thought of that crossover, but now that I talk about intangibles,
because actually intangibles is what you had in spades, in terms of education.
Yeah.
But it was not measured and therefore not celebrated when you went to high school.
Identified. Was not identified.
Not identified.
If anything, it was... I remember a teacher saying I was the worst head boy of all time.
Can't believe you're a head boy.
Worst head boy of all time that ever done. Huh.
Yeah.
I never thought of that. It's a great insight.
And it's just I think we've got to keep having these conversations, and we've also got to shy away from simplistic solutions. My worry is that policy and decision making ultimately comes back to what can we do that we can fit in a box. And
to make our life easier.
That is tangible and measurable and all the rest of it. And what do we lose at a cost? And politicians fall into the same trap. And
this is art versus science, right?
Yeah. And I guess we're having that conversation nationally and internationally when we talk about having well-being budgets and what that possibly means. Not that I really understand that inside and out.
Yeah.
This is talking about, the how do we capture and identify and celebrate the intangibles and make that as valuable as the tangible stuff like NCEA.
Yeah.
I like intangible. That's now going to be added
to
my...
thing.
Yeah.
It exists in sport, and there's a direct revenue. There's a direct correlation to revenue and value to a team.
Yeah. So we've got to get better. How do we capture the intangible, identify it and celebrate in education?
Because weirdly enough, sometimes those that don't have as much skill but more of the intangibles are actually always put number one over the number two. So on paper, they're not as good, but in practicality in the real world, they are more valuable.
See, I reckon we could get together, nail this.
Jeez. Okay, so I just think of like NFL, sport. Love it.
Excellent.
And so you're going to Italy?
Yes.
This weekend?
Yes, I'm flying out to Italy on Sunday night. I'm going to be talking at an event in Bologna.
That's so gnarly.
It is gnarly and slightly surreal.
How does this happen?
So Albany Senior High School is part of a alliance of schools called the Global Schools Alliance. And
Illuminati.
So the Illuminati. And again, I've got Barbara Kavanagh to thank for laying down those foundations. So Albany...
And she's a weapon?
She is a total weapon. She's at Huntley now, doing amazing work.
She's principal. She's a weapon.
Yeah, she's absolutely phenomenal.
Shot bubs.
And so Albany Senior High School are part of the Global Schools Alliance, which is places like High Tech High in the States. There's there's schools in India, in Australia, America. There's about 10 schools that make up the alliance. They had a meet-up here last year because Freeman's Bay School is part of the Global Schools Alliance, and so is Stonefields. And we had this really cool meetup, a really awesome lady called Lenny that she runs it out of Denmark. Incredible does
Euro
incredible
weapon.
work. Yeah, weapons
I bet
all
she's
round.
well dressed.
Yeah, she's cool. And so we hit it off, and she got excited by my level of excitement whenever I talked about these things. And
Energy
she
brings
decided,
energy. Yep.
I needed to be at this event. So it is her doing, and it's her that I have to thank for this event. But I love it. There's going to be people from OECD and UNESCO, those sort of international people that have real influence in this space. There's going to be people there from Think Global in New York and the Alt School from the States, and a number of schools from across Europe. So I'm going to be going as, more of, yes, I get to speak, and the exciting thing is I get to share what we're doing at Albany Senior High School and what's going on in New Zealand. But probably more excitingly, I get to go there and learn and listen
cool.
and meet incredible people and see what's going on.
It's going to be cool.
It's going to be exciting.
What do after the third bottle of wine, what do teachers, how does that roll?
It's obscene. It pays not to see it.
It's like, when the go with the GNC, it's a fuck, gee. Because I've been around that in different industries, and watching their banter when they get really passionate about something, and I'm just like, it's Spanish to me. I'm like, okay, yep.
It's totally another language, and because at these sort of events and the sort of people that I tend to connect with is we're so deep into this stuff that we get a bit carried away. And my poor husband who is a skateboarder and not an educator at all, he has to suffer gatherings occasionally where he's just like in the background going, my God, drool coming out of here because it's like glazed over, and so he hides in his man cave at any given moment.
No, but it's your world.
It is my world, and I love it, and it's important.
If you were to wave the magic wand, if you were who's the boss of Education New Zealand?
Chris Hipkins is our Minister of Education.
And is it that the boss?
As close as he can get to it, I believe.
And so would this be the person that's like, yo, mandatory or mufti, do this, do that? Like, is there a person, like, if you were to wave the magic wand of Minister of Education or whatever the thing was, what would be 3 things that you'd do overnight to make more breadcrumbs for a 15-year-old?
Okay. I know, and I've told him as much, probably most of these things. The first thing is I would want him to have the courage to actually transform how we measure success. Okay. I believe that they are doing good work, and I have no doubt that ultimately where they go with NCEA, and they've got something called a School Leavers Toolkit and some vocational pathway stuff, it will be good, but it's not transformational.
Got it. Good, not great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and the second thing that I would want him to really focus on is call schools on the concept of being inclusive. So we had a new Education Act update recently, and in there one of the Board of Trustees.
You talked about this with Steve, I remember.
Yeah, Board of Trustees who hold schools to account have always had to report on the academic achievement of a school. So now they have to do 3 things. They have to talk about the academic achievement of a school, how inclusive a school is, and how well that they honour the Treaty of Waitangi. So 2 and 3, I want them to really call schools on being inclusive and really call schools on being honouring the Treaty of Waitangi.
That's a thing.
That's a thing.
Damn.
And it's not just calling them on it with a stick. It's like, actually, how are you going to provide the carrot to make people want to make these changes, and how are you going to resource it? The other thing that I would change, and this is something I waffle on a lot about, is the idea that we go beyond the idea of schools being schools and we move them to being co-learning spaces where we have businesses, schools and health services. You
have talked about this.
Yeah. Existing side by side. Kumbaya, holding hands.
So in a nutshell, what would that look like practically?
It would look like campuses like Albany Senior High School and any school building and facilities being opened up to both startups, entrepreneurs, having physical sort of incubator spaces alongside students, alongside a whole lot of services around health and well-being, doctors, psychologists, anything that you're going to need, financial literacy services, all of those community things coming into the heart of a school. Get those, do you remember night school? People used to go to evening courses at schools.
We didn't have that either. Aranui High was not the most
But,
progressive.
But places like Hagley have continued
Yes,
to do this,
yes,
and actually Hagley is one of the places that is a model for a lot of these things already. They have young people and they have adults.
Very
they have their
creative and
campus
inclusive,
open
yeah.
day and night.
So essentially it's leveraging existing assets on unused time to act as a smarter bridge between student and the real world.
Absolutely. And the walls of school becoming absolutely permeable. And you can move.
Micro-credentials for...
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. Micro-credentials. And micro-credentials are part of the School Leavers Toolkit. So at the moment, they're putting pictures out. We should talk about this. We could launch the intangibles.
I mess with this. I think this is a very... It's not just interesting selfishly if you're the government. It's actually a potential new revenue stream, which could de-risk... very cool.
Yeah.
So you're going to Italy. How long are you going for?
I'm going, so I fly out on Sunday night and I come back the following Tuesday. So I've got a few days in Bologna and then a couple of days at this incredible conference called the Education Renaissance Let's Build the Future meetup. So it's going to be incredible. I'm going to be through our DisruptED platform on Facebook. I'm going to be doing as much live blogging, live podcasting, Facebook Lives as I can. So anyone I can corner, I've learned from the best, Robert. You just corner and go, so maybe not the dodgy people on the streets in Las Vegas, but I'm going to get,
The good thing is when you roll like me, is you've got a very long leash.
Yeah.
And as long as the platform exists for others that are more curated and polished, things work out A-OK.
Yeah, but I'm a huge believer in, I love live blogging and I love Facebook Live. I'm a big fan of quick and dirty because if it means the message gets out there and there might be some typos, there might be this, that or the other. Actually, what matters is that you've shared your learning. So
and I think
I'll be trying to do that all week.
When people know your intent, they give you way more leeway for the quality.
Yeah.
So quantity gets through a lot easier.
I'm a big believer in better done than perfect.
There you go.
Yeah.
I just get it done, stuff it. On that note, great yarn.
Yeah.
Didn't see this coming. Obviously,
yeah.
Steve's a lot smarter.
Steve, you were so missed.
So just also to be fair, Steve, he takes one little education trip over and he's got to have some backup. I flip and fly in straight at 5 and I'm just... my first meeting was at 7. Jeez, Steve.
But he'll be back next week. He'll be at the helm.
I like Steve.
I'm pretty sure he'll be talking about the play-based learning. If not, I know that he's got a whole lot to talk about in the work that he's doing at Age School and the trip that he's just been on. So I'm sure there's lots to learn about next week at 5 o'clock.
There you go. Is it? Oh, on Thursday at 5.
Yeah, Thursday at 5
next week. Because you know what's on at Friday at 5?
What's Friday at 5?
Switch is having a party.
And I'm not in the country.
Oh.
Could you sort that out?
Oh, we've...
You might
more party
need
for the rest of us.
Next time.
If people want to check out the group, or how do they want to? If they want to connect up with you, what's the best way to get to you? How do they...
So DisruptED is a Facebook group. Otherwise, if you hook up with me on Twitter, I'm just Claire Amos NZ on Twitter. I'll be sharing everything there as well.
Okay. You can finish off. This is actually technically...
this is my
this
show.
Is yours.
So thanks for that, Robert. That was a great discussion here on DisruptED. We'll be back next week, or at least Steve will be back next week with an unknown guest.
It won't be me again.
Yeah, it won't be Robert. So this time next week, join us through DisruptED on Facebook or through the Switch Aotearoa platforms. And we'll see you next week, and I'll see you the week after.
Adios, team.